could choose one word to describe you, your life, your legacy, everything that is going to be in your life, what you want to achieve, what is that one word? Better yet, it may describe your nature. You may want it to describe your character. It may summarize ultimately what you stand for in your life. So if that's the case, what word would you choose? I had some conversations with people, and there were many different words shared, many things that people wanted to make that one word, but there were three big words that really stood out that a lot of people used. Successful, influential, happy. These were three really big words that a lot of people would share. But the funny thing is I believe there's one word in God's eyes that really kind of stands out above the rest of them. Big surprise, it's not one of these three. Because when we get to heaven, if we've truly lived a life that's meant in service to God, that we've followed Jesus, that we've been obedient to what God desires, ultimately, He's not going to say, "Well done, my good and successful servant, influential servant. Oh, very good, my happy servant." No, we know what He's going to say. He's going to say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Look at the person next to you this morning and say, "You look faithful. You look faithful." And you know what? If they're rooting for the Eagles today, say, "You look really faithful." Today, we're going to talk about that one word that can really change your life. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to be together, for your word to come alive. We know your faithfulness to us. Help us understand how we apply that in return to be faithful to you this morning. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Now, we've been in our series, Pre-Decide. This idea that life is based on your decisions, that the quality of said life is determined by the quality of said decisions. So what we do in pre-deciding is we go, okay, when I am faced with a certain situation, I have already pre-decided that I'm going to take this action. And so we've had these resolutions we've been talking about as we go through these weeks. Those resolutions are that I'm going to pre-decide that I'm going to be ready, I'm going to be consistent, I'm going to be devoted, I'm going to be generous, I'm going to be faithful, and I'm going to be a finisher. And what happens is we get reasons behind why we're pre-deciding these things. And this morning, the reason that we pre-decide I am faithful is really honestly a lot like the others that we've already been through. And that's because you are never, just as the rest of them, going to accidentally just become unbelievably faithful. Okay? It's not just like this thing that happens. It's a pre-decided choice that happens day to day, week to week, month to month, and decade after decade. And this is why, with God's help, we can continue to connect these together. Because isn't this interesting? You are never consistently faithful. Yes, because we pre-decide we're consistent. You're never consistently faithful without being intentional. Now, if we're being honest, there's a reason why we struggle with this, a reason why it can be difficult for us to deal with this. For most of us, it's because there is a trajectory in our life that leads us toward what's easy. We like convenience, right? The old one click and it's taken care of. It surrounds us in our culture and our society, and we like that. So being faithful, especially in our obedience to God, is rarely easy. It's rarely easy. In fact, a lot of times, it's usually a very hard pill to swallow. Why is that? Why is it that it's so hard to swallow that pill when it comes to being obedient to God? Well, because it usually comes with a cost, right? It requires a sacrifice and a surrender in ways that we don't naturally just want to give. But I can tell you this, it is always worth it. It will always be worth it. So if we're going to establish this perspective of understanding how we pre-decide to be faithful, what's the practical perspective? Let me give you a starting point for this through the prophet Habakkuk, that wonderfully weird phrased little book in the Old Testament, the minor prophets that we all go, that exists? Yes, it does. Habakkuk, in chapter 2, verse 4, he says this, "Look at the proud. They trust in themselves, and their lives are crooked. But the righteous will live by their faithfulness to God." Habakkuk's giving us two people here. The first person that he gives us trusts in themselves. They trust in their own knowledge. They trust in their own bank account. They trust in their own ability to get things done. But then there's the faithful person too. And that second person, it says, they live by what? Their faithfulness to God. I kind of get sad when I think about that. Because I realize, I don't know about you, but I kind of tend to lead toward often being the proud one. It kind of becomes more of a natural process to lean in and be the proud one. I can do it myself. I have the ability to do this. I don't need anybody else to help me. I can do it under my own power. Do we feel that? Do we understand that? I don't mean do you think I'm like that. I mean, do you think you battle with that? Let's get this straight, okay? But it raises a question then. What does it actually mean then to be faithful? What does God mean when he says, I want you to predecide, I want you to be living in faithfulness to me? Practically, we might simply break this down and say, well, it's just about being a good person. They're just a really good person. They're so nice. They're so helpful. They're clean. They obviously shower, so they smell good. They're organized, and everything's not just a mess. But when we look at how Jesus talked about the idea of faithfulness, he kind of takes a totally different approach than that. He takes a totally different approach. It's not these individual characteristics. Instead, all this talk on faithfulness kind of centers in and narrows down to three specifics. It's kind of generalizing it so that we get an idea to easily practically apply this. But when Jesus talks about faithfulness, he says that faithfulness is this. It's 1, how we treat people. 2, how we steward resources. And 3, how we respond to him. On the basis and the value of Jesus' teaching, then, we can break it down this way. This morning we're going to say that we predecide to do 3 things ourselves. We understand that we're going to be faithful because every interaction is an opportunity to add value, every resource is an opportunity to multiply, and every prompting is an opportunity to obey God. Because when Jesus talked about faithfulness, it was how we treat people, how we steward resources, and how we respond to him. So if we're going to be faithful, we're going to predecide that every interaction is an opportunity to add value. This means that everywhere you go, every person that you meet, and everyone that you see and run into, you are given in that moment the opportunity to bless them, to encourage them, to serve them in some way, and to add value to their day and to their life. We predecide that every person, everybody we come in contact with, every opportunity we're given, the reason that we do this, the reason we predecide this faithfulness, is because we get the opportunity to show the love of God that exists within us. Now, the reason why we struggle with this, and a lot of time the reason why people don't do this, is because, like I said, you're never going to consistently add value by chance. And the reason is, we tend to be focused on ourselves. We look at ourselves. Here's an illustration of this. Think about this, okay? Someone pulls up an old photo. There's 8 people in it, and you're one of them. In all honesty, when they go, hey, take a look at this photo that we're in, who's the first person you look at? You look at yourself. Oh, no, the pretty girl that was at camp that year in the middle. No, you're looking at yourself. And the thought is probably, ooh, did I really look good back then? Ugh, my cheeks look a little fat. That's not a really great photo. Or it's like, how do I compare now to when I did then? I know what I looked like then. How do I look like now? We get really centrally focused on ourselves and how we look in that photo. And what happens is our interaction when it comes to people ends up going in the same direction. We have this tendency to go, oh, what do they think of me? How am I coming across? Was I good to them? Did I make a good impression? Ooh, that happens in dating relationships, doesn't it? And you're meeting them for the first time. Ooh, but what if every interaction wasn't a self-focused idea? What if we flipped the script and in pre-deciding that we're going to be faithful, instead of being me-focused, we're you-focused? How, in this moment, can I add value to them? In Ephesians 4:29, it says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." Our opportunity to add value means that we have the opportunity, or as Paul is saying here in addressing, we have the opportunity when you walk into a room, you can make the climate of the entire room better. Are you that kind of person? Are you the kind of person when you walk into that room, you make people feel better about themselves? And ultimately, does your presence encourage them in their faith? Or better yet, a place where there isn't any, does it add a step to leading them toward faith? You can add value to people's lives. And Jesus gave us many examples. He did in what he said and what he didn't say, what he did and what he didn't do. We can see this idea of faithfulness. Think about it. Remember the time when the disciples were all worried about how are we going to feed everybody? What in the world is going to happen? We don't have food. We don't have money. We can't do this. And Jesus, just by being present there, he made it better because he just said, guys, stop. Don't worry about what you're going to eat or drink. Look at the birds of the air, man. They don't store things up, but I take care of them. Or how about the woman who was caught in the sin of adultery, feeling intense shame, and she's brought before Jesus by her accusers and the religious leaders, and they are shaming her, and you know what the law says about this. Did Jesus condemn her? Did he jump on the bandwagon with them? Did he say anything? No. He was writing in the dirt. What? Slowly but surely they all leave, and he looked at her and said, "No, I don't condemn you. But go and sin no more." He didn't condemn. There was no action of condemnation, and there was an encouragement. He added value to her. When Peter denied Christ 3 times, which he knew was going to happen, was Jesus' response, "I can't trust you anymore, get lost"? No, in the back of it, he says, "Peter, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Feed my sheep." Action, encouragement, the building up. And he says, "My Father," speaking to everybody then and now, "my Father, he loves you. And I need you to know, I will never leave you or forsake you. I am here to consistently add value to who you are and what you're going to be." Every interaction is an opportunity to show God's love, to build others up, and to add value to them. You know, when I went through my divorce, I felt deeply rejected. That was one of the lowest points of my entire life. That was just deeply hurtful, and I resented so much about that, and I let so much judgment come upon me from the people that looked down on me because of that. And one of the mentors that I was spending time with at that time, he said to me, Hunter looked at me, and he said, "No person can stop what God desires to do with you. No person can stop what God desires to do with you." He added value in that moment that he didn't even realize. And just like that, think about it. You have no idea how God might use one single word of encouragement through you to accomplish something. Adam talked about it. One of the major things we do, encouragement cards. You know how cool it is every Monday to come into the office and see how many of those are spread out on Nancy's desk as she's separating them into who they go to? It's such a simple way to be able to spread that encouragement and add value. And you have no idea how one of those cards might instantaneously change somebody's day in that moment. That's why we choose to say that I've pre-decided that I'm faithful, that every opportunity is a chance to add value. And every resource is an opportunity to multiply. In Matthew 25, Jesus tells a parable about a very wealthy and rich man who's going on a journey, and he leaves his servants with some of his money. He gives 5 bags to one, he gives 2 bags to another, and he gives 1 bag to one, these 3 guys. Now, the guys with 5 bags and 2 bags, we know what they do. They went out. They realized that there was risk involved, but they realized that they had an opportunity to multiply, and so they went out and they doubled the investment that their master had given them. And when he returned, he looked at them and he said, "Well done, good and faithful servants. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things." See, they multiplied what he gave them. And God's saying, if you multiply what I give to you, and you do that for the sake and the purpose of the kingdom of God, that is an act of faithfulness. You're being faithful to me because I've promised you that I'm going to take care of this. I've promised you that I'm going to do something more, and you've taken me at my word. Do you know what the Greek word is for faithfulness? Anybody? Had that challenge out there. Do you know? No. Pistos. This is our seminary lesson for this morning. The literal definition and translation of pistos is this: persons who show themselves faithful in the transaction of business, the execution of commands, or the discharge of official duties. So when it comes to God, it's when you are doing things for the kingdom of God, you are obeying what God has asked you to do, and you are living out the life that He's asked you to live. Meaning one of the most faithful acts for you to do is to care for what God has given you, and in taking the opportunity to multiply it. Now, these may be goofy, simple ideas, but He's given you a house, right? And He's given you a yard. And those are blessings that you receive from God. Stands to reason you take care of the resources He's given you, right? How about your car? You take it in for regular maintenance. He's blessed you with a vehicle to get you around from A to B, to travel, to see things. So we take care of the resources that He has given us. How about the body He's given you? If we're properly taking care of that, you're eating right, you're doing some exercise, you're taking care of the resource that He's given you. In doing so, you multiply the years that the house and the yard is nice. You multiply the years that the car can run. You multiply the years that you can potentially live here on this earth and serve Him. Greater yet, if you are a follower of Christ, He has given you a command and a resource that you're to use to speak to others. Thank you, Val. What a great way to hop into this. How many of us are taking this resource and multiplying it? How many of you in the past month have invited somebody to come to church? How many of you in the past month have chosen to have a conversation with somebody about your faith in Jesus? Convicts me too. And the funny thing is that when you're not in a ministry situation, a lot of times there's a struggle there. And I want the business owners here to realize I've got great news for you. I've got great news for you. If you're faithful in business, if you're God-honoring in the integrity that you have in your business, I promise you people will see that and God blesses that. God uses that to speak to them. Even in your business, you may not be in the business of ministry, but you are in the business of God. As a business owner, when you take a risk with that little bit that you have, whatever it is that your business is, and you create more through your business that you provide for people, and you do it in a God-honoring way, that service blesses them. And let me tell you, God will bless your business in return. The church is meant to be that way at a totally different level, We're supposed to have passionate stewardship to multiply what He's given us, to use that to multiply His kingdom and to invest in it. And when we're efficient with that, we lead with irrational generosity. Guys, you did that this year in one of the decisions that was made with the budget. Our local missions and our global partners, you guys chose to more than double what it was last year that we were going to invest into that area of the budget. That was an act of faithfulness in what God is doing through the missions. And increasing that also poured more into our developing care team and the benevolence ministry that is taking care of people inside our walls. What we have done for the Peace family is mind-blowing. When you built the Scott House, it's mind-blowing. That is faithfulness in multiplying what God has given. It's God-honoring because we steward what was given and we multiply it. God says it's faithful. Here's the funny side is there's another side to this. We see the guy with one bag. Master, I was afraid and went out, and I hid your gold in the ground. Here's what belongs to you. And the reply, you wicked, lazy servant. Okay, he was afraid. I get it. I've been there. Anybody ever had that boss? Anybody ever had that boss that you're scared of him? You don't want to, just don't want to mess with him. Okay? How many of you wonder if you are that boss? Okay, so listen. Hear this, see this, feel this. The guys that multiplied were called faithful. The guy that buried it in fear, he wasn't just lazy. He was wicked. To be faithful, every interaction is an opportunity to add value, and every resource needs to be an opportunity to multiply, and every prompting is an opportunity to obey God. When Paul was preparing to head to Jerusalem, he said this to the church in Acts. He said, and now, compelled by the Spirit, I am going to Jerusalem, not knowing what will happen to me there. Ever been in those times? You can't explain it. Maybe you don't understand it. Maybe you just feel called to do it. Because when you're faithfully pursuing Jesus, there are times of prompting. And as Paul said here, compelled. You will feel so strongly that you're compelled to do something. And faith is responding even when you don't know what is going to happen. As Paul said, I'm going to Jerusalem. I don't know what's going to happen there, but I'm going because I'm compelled by the Spirit to do so. I am prompted by the Spirit to do so. God's telling me to do this. I don't understand it, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it in obedience and with a whole faithful heart. It can be little things. It can be big things. Abby and I sat in a restaurant. I give you illustrations from our life because that's the easiest way for me to explain this. Abby and I are sitting at a restaurant. We had a great server. She was doing a great job, but she felt overwhelmed. And at one point, she apologizes to us, and she says, I'm so sorry. I'm doing my best. This is the first day that I have been on the floor by myself, and I have had tons of tables. I've been swamped trying to take care of everybody. A little bit later, Abby went up to use the restroom before we left, and she came back, and she just looks at me, and she goes, 50. And I go, what? She goes, 50. I went, okay, what do you mean? She says, I don't know. I was going to the bathroom. I was thinking about what she said and how hard she's trying to work, and I just felt God say 50. I just took that to mean she needed $50, and so we left her a $50 tip. I don't know if that was the answer to it, but that's what my wife felt compelled by the Spirit with, and so that's what we did. Another time, I'm standing in line at the grocery store, and there's a guy behind me in the self-checkout, and all he's got is a head of lettuce. And I'm scanning my last item, and I hear, pay for lettuce, guy. And I just turned around and I said, hey, why don't you just scan that through? And he goes, what? He goes, it's just a head of lettuce. I go, I know, I don't care, scan it. So he scanned it, and I said, have a good day. And he goes, thanks. he was completely clueless as to why in the world. But I guarantee you, he probably went home and told his wife about it. And that works for me because it's just, that could have been a simple step in a direction. Who knows what kind of value was added to that? But the one that hits me the most is this. My buddy Aaron. He was sitting on his back porch in the darkest moment of his life, and his gun in his lap. I had no idea. But for some reason in that moment, his phone went off, and it was a text message I'd sent him. Hey man, thinking about you, praying about you today. Let me know if you need anything. So simple. In that moment, he unloaded the gun, put it back in the safe. And the next day, he came to the church and he came to my office and said, I got to tell you something. Guys, you never know in a moment. You never know in a moment what it's going to mean. Every prompting is an opportunity to obey God. There's a spiritual principle here to this. It's not easy, but it's simple. Obedience is our responsibility. The outcome is God's. Trust me, our God, He'd accomplish anything. Nothing's impossible. And when we're obedient, everything is possible. Sometimes we're not going to see the reason. Sometimes we will, sometimes we won't. So that's why we have to pre-decide that I'm going to be faithful no matter what. God's going to at some point put somebody on your heart, and you know what? You're going to look at him and go, I'm not sure why, but I'm supposed to tell you this. I'm supposed to give this to you. I'm supposed to bless you in this way. This is why you pre-decide, I'm going to be faithful. Faithful to add value, faithful to multiply, and above all, faithful to obey when God asks me. Because the righteous, what? Live by their faithfulness to God. Now, I've struggled in this way. There's no lie there. It's not easy. You have to wake up each day and make the decision. I have never gotten this fully right. I'm never going to get it fully right until the day I can stand before Jesus and enter into His kingdom, as all of us will. But I've learned that you got to start by being faithful in just the small things. Coming out of a divorce, I'm thankful for redemption. I had a broken relationship. Now I have a promise that I've made to Abby, and we're at 11 years and counting. And every single year it gets better and it gets stronger. Because we've decided, it doesn't matter what happens, we are faithful to each other and what we've promised. When we both met, we were both in some pretty bad debt, and we weren't really good with money. And so we pre-decided at that point, we made a commitment. We're going to be faithful in our stewardship with our gift to God every single paycheck. And you want to know something? Even in the times when we felt like we didn't have enough, God has always provided. Always. We've never had a reason to worry. Somehow it always gets taken care of. In those times when I've wanted to hold tightly, when I get into the comfort situations, and no, I'm comfort and I'm stable, and I don't want to give up what I've got. Whether it's as simple as the lettuce guy, or writing a check to save some child out of human trafficking to Destiny Rescue, or you're in the aisle at the grocery store and God says, that person behind you could really use prayer. Pray with them. Yours, mine, ours, our whole comfort and stability should be in the God who is faithful to us no matter what. And He desires that same thing from us. So many of these things, many of us or all of us experience at times. And do we see it coming? No, a lot of times we don't see it coming. But when we're faithful with a little, God trusts us with much. And if we desire those things we talked about way at the beginning, I want to be successful, I want to be influential, I want to be happy, I want to be used in those ways, then what are you going to be? First and foremost, you're going to be faithful, even in the little things. Because as Habakkuk told us, the righteous will live by their faithfulness to God. Every interaction, an opportunity to add value. Every resource, an opportunity to multiply. Every prompting, an opportunity to obey. And you got to do it because James tells us in chapter 4, anyone who knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, sins. To know what you're supposed to do, to hear God and to choose not to do it, is direct disobedience. Because you got to remember, obedience is our responsibility. The outcome is God's. And be rest assured, if you overestimate what you think you can get done in the short run, you're going to underestimate what God can truly do with a lifetime of faithfulness. So don't overestimate what you can do on your own, because you don't want to underestimate what God can do.